The night the lights went out, the whole country seemed to hold its breath. One moment the telly hummed softly in the corner, and the next darkness. Not just in your house, but in every street, every town, every little terrace tucked under a cold British sky. You'd pull a blanket tighter around your shoulders, watch the candle flame wobble in the draft, and listen as the radio whispered about strikes, inflation, and something ominously called the winter of discontent. And somehow, strangely, you still felt alive. Because this was the 1970s. And if you grew up then, these weren't just memories. These were the moments that shaped you. The 1970s in Britain weren't gray, no matter what the photographs claim. They were gold, glitter, grime, chaos, and a spark of electricity running through everyday life. From decimal coins to glam rock, from picket lines to punk clubs, everything felt like it was shifting under your feet. This isn't a history lesson. It's a journey back to the decade when the future felt loud, messy, and brilliantly unpredictable. Let's start with the money. It looked like monopoly money at first. Monday, February 15th, 1971. Britain woke up with new coins, new rules, and new confusion. Shillings, florins, half-crowns gone. In came shiny coins that felt far too light, almost like toys. For grandparents who grew up counting in 12s and 20s, this wasn't just change. It was disorientation. Shops hung signs explaining prices. Kids did the maths faster than adults. Cash registers jammed. Arguments broke out over what a 10p really meant. People clutched old coins not for value, but for comfort. Decimal Day was meant to sound like a celebration, but to many, it felt like a funeral for the familiar. Even monopoly boards had to be redesigned. Even pocket money lost its certainty. If you grew up in the 70s, you remember that jungled clink of old and new coins in your coat pocket, and how long it took for it all to finally make sense. Then came the thunder. The platform boots, the eyeliner, the rebellion wrapped in sequins. When Mark Bolan shimmered under the stage lights, or David Bowie appeared as Ziggy Stardust with flame-orange hair and alien eyes, you knew British music had crossed into a new galaxy. This wasn't rebellion. It was reinvention. Every boy wanted glitter on his cheeks. Every girl wanted silver boots. And every living room glowed with the colors of Top of the Pops. Behind the sparkle, life was still hard strikes, blackouts, rubbish piling on pavements. But glam rock didn't ignore the gloom. It danced through it. And for a whole generation of teens, it wasn't just music. It was armor. But while glam was on the telly, something else was happening in the North. It was fast. It was sweaty. It was freedom. Northern soul wasn't about the charts. It was about the chase. In clubs like Wigan Casino and Blackpool Mecca, teenagers danced until sunrise to rare American soul tracks no one else had heard. The more obscure the record, the more the crowd surged. Spins, backdrops, splits movements that felt like breaking gravity. Talcum powder on the floor, sweatbands, heartbeats in sync with the bass. For 8 hours straight, nothing mattered but the next track. If you lived it, your legs remember. Your heart remembers. While the kids danced, Britain itself seemed to be grinding to a halt. The bins didn't get collected. The lights didn't come back on. And sometimes even the dead weren't buried. Britain in the 70s was a country negotiating with itself. Miners, refuse workers, train staff, gravediggers. Everyone had a breaking point, and in those years, many reached it. Children did homework by candlelight. Television shut off early. The government announced the 3-day week, and it wasn't a slogan. It was law. Tension lived in every factory, every corner shop, every quiet conversation about petrol and prices. But somehow, people adapted. They joked. They shared. They made do. Hardship built resilience the way only hardship can. And through it all, the soundtrack of the decade didn't come from one place. It came from everywhere. Reggae brought by Caribbean communities, soothed and united streets across the country. It taught Britain to listen differently. Then punk exploded like a firecracker. Angry, raw, untidy, unapologetic. The Sex Pistols, the Clash, they didn't care if they offended you. They cared if they woke you up. And just as punk scorched the earth, new wave arrived, sharp edges with neon colors, eyeliner, and synths. The Jam, Elvis Costello, Susie and the Banshees. Music didn't just play in the background. It rewired people. If you grew up in the 70s, you remember when songs didn't ask for permission. They barged in and took a seat. What about life at home? Well, the house always smelled of coal, toast, and damp wool. Central heating was a luxury. Bedrooms turned to ice in winter. You warmed socks by the fire and boiled kettles on the stove. Blue Peter on the telly. Condensation on single-pane windows. A family huddled together on one sofa cushion. And then the cassette arrived. Soon after, the Walkman. For the first time ever, music became private, portable, personal. A universe in your pocket. This little piece of plastic changed everything, letting you carry your own soundtrack out of the living room and into the world. As the decade drew to a close, a new kind of rebel emerged. They looked like aliens, but beautiful ones. The new romantics weren't punk, weren't glam, weren't rock. They were something entirely new. Soft rebellion wrapped in lace, ruffles, and synthesizers. In clubs like the Blitz, boys wore skirts, girls wore tuxedos, and everyone looked like they'd stepped off a film set. This wasn't just music. It was theater. It was escape. It was permission to be whatever you wanted to be, a flamboyant, stylish middle finger to the grime and the gray. The 1970s weren't smooth, but they were unforgettable. If you grew up in Britain, then you remember the cold bedrooms, the blackouts, the glitter, the grit, the music that saved you, and the feeling that everything, absolutely everything, was changing. It wasn't always easy, but it was always real. Because growing up in the 70s meant finding color in the cracks, laughing through darkness, dancing through uncertainty, and holding on to every moment that shaped your world. If even one memory stirred something in you, hit subscribe. Let's keep these stories alive, one story at a time. Thanks for watching.